The stars looked different now. Ambassador Chen Wei stood before the massive viewing window of Unity Station, humanity's newest orbital platform floating in the space between Earth and Mars. She watched the distant points of light, knowing that somewhere out there something was coming, something that would change everything. Ambassador, they're here. The voice of Captain Rodriguez crackled through her earpiece. Chen turned from the window, her expression calm despite the racing of her heart. This was the moment humanity had prepared for, since the first radio signals from deep space arrived 5 years ago. First contact, the dream of every generation since humans first looked up at the night sky. But the signals hadn't been friendly. Chen walked through the corridors of Unity Station, her footsteps echoing against the metal walls. Around her, the station buzzed with activity. Scientists, military personnel, diplomats from every nation on Earth had gathered here for this historic moment. They all wore the same expression, a mixture of excitement and dread. The Crix Dominion had announced their arrival with a simple message broadcast across every frequency humanity used. The translation had been clear, almost insultingly simple. Submit or die, surrender your world and join our empire or be destroyed. It was an ultimatum that the Crix had apparently delivered to dozens of species across the galaxy. An ultimatum that had never been refused, until now. Chen entered the command center, a circular room filled with screens and consoles. At the center stood a holographic display showing the approaching vessels. 12 massive ships, each one larger than anything humanity had ever built. They moved with purpose, their trajectory taking them directly toward Earth. They'll be in communication range in 10 minutes, said General Sarah Park, her military uniform crisp despite the long hours of waiting. Their weapons are powered up. They're not hiding their capabilities. Good, Chen replied. Neither will we. The other diplomats in the room shifted nervously. Ambassador Okonkwo from the African Union spoke up, his deep voice filled with concern. Are we certain about this approach? Perhaps we should hear their full terms before we respond. Chen shook her head. We've studied their pattern. They've conquered 43 known species over the past 1,000 years. Every single one tried negotiation first. Every single one was enslaved or destroyed. The Crix don't negotiate. They dominate, so we fight? Asked Ambassador Takahashi from Japan. No, Chen said firmly. First we warn them. The ships grew larger on the displays. Humanity had spent 5 years preparing for this moment, ever since the first intercepted transmissions revealed the existence of the Crix Dominion. 5 years of furious construction, of weapons development, of training, 5 years of unity unprecedented in human history. The old conflicts hadn't disappeared, but they had been set aside. Humanity faced an external threat now, and every person on Earth understood what was at stake. Incoming transmission, announced the communications officer. The holographic display shifted, and suddenly they were looking at an alien face. The Crix commander was tall, his body covered in dark scales that reflected the light in strange patterns. His eyes were yellow with vertical slits like a reptile. When he spoke, the translation software rendered his words in cold, clinical English. Primitive species of the third planet. I am War Commander Zethus of the Crix Dominion. You have been selected for incorporation into our empire. You will surrender all military assets, provide complete access to your world's resources, and submit your population for evaluation and assignment. Compliance will result in survival. Resistance will result in extinction. You have 1 solar cycle to respond. The transmission ended. Silence filled the command center. Every eye turned to Chen. She stepped forward, positioning herself in front of the communication array. Open a channel, broadband. I want every ship in their fleet to receive this. Channel open, Ambassador. Chen took a deep breath. What she said next would echo across the stars, would be studied by historians for generations, would determine the fate of her species. She thought of her children back on Earth, of her grandmother who had survived wars that now seemed tiny compared to what was coming. She thought of every human who had ever lived, every person who had fought and died for freedom. War Commander Zethus of the Crix Dominion. I am Ambassador Chen Wei, speaking on behalf of humanity and the sovereign nations of Earth. We have received your ultimatum. We reject it completely. She paused, letting the translation software catch up. On the displays, she could see activity on the Crix ships. They were probably confused. Species didn't refuse the Crix. You should know that we have studied your empire carefully. We know your tactics, your history, your patterns of conquest. We know that you rely on fear and overwhelming force. We know that you have never encountered serious resistance because you choose your targets carefully, selecting species that are divided, unprepared, or technologically inferior. Chen pulled up a data display and transmitted it directly to the Krix fleet. We are transmitting complete specifications of our military capabilities, our weapon systems, our defensive installations, our troop deployments. We are showing you exactly what you face if you proceed with hostile action. General Park winced. It went against every military instinct to reveal their capabilities to an enemy, but it was necessary for what came next. You are viewing the defensive capabilities of a species that has spent 10,000 years perfecting the art of war. We have fought each other in conflicts that span continents and consume millions of lives. We have developed weapons that can split atoms and unleash the power of stars. We have built machines that think and adapt and learn. We have turned warfare into a science. Chen's voice grew harder, colder. But we have also learned the cost of war. We have learned that the greatest strength is not in the weapon you wield, but in the choice not to use it. We have learned that true power lies in restraint. She leaned toward the camera, her eyes intense. So we are giving you this warning, War Commander Zethus. You have 72 Earth hours to withdraw from our space. Leave now and there will be no conflict. Stay, and you will face the full military might of a species that has spent its entire existence learning how to fight and kill and destroy. The command center was silent. Every person present understood the weight of what Chen had just said. This is not a bluff. This is not bravado. This is a simple statement of fact. We are giving you the choice we wish someone had given us throughout our bloody history. We are giving you a warning. Leave now or face the consequences. Chen straightened. After 72 hours, if you remain in our space, humanity will consider your presence an act of war. And we will respond accordingly. There will be no negotiation, no surrender, no mercy. We will protect our home and our freedom with every resource at our disposal. She paused one final time. The Krix dominion has never been refused. You have never faced a species like us. We pray you will be wise enough to leave. Because if you stay, you will learn exactly what humanity is capable of when we stop holding back. Transmission complete, said the communications officer. Chen stepped back, suddenly aware of how hard her heart was pounding. Around her, the command center erupted in quiet conversations. Some looked relieved, others terrified, still others grimly determined. Do you think they'll listen? Asked General Park quietly. Chen looked at the displays showing the Krix fleet. The ships hadn't changed course. They continued their approach toward Earth, steady and confident. No, Chen admitted. They've conquered too many species. They've never lost. They think we're bluffing or stupid or both. Then we're going to war. Yes. Chen felt the weight of that single word. War with an interstellar empire. War with a species that had crushed dozens of civilizations. War with an enemy that had never known defeat. But humanity had something the Krix didn't understand. Humanity had spent millennia fighting itself, learning every possible way to wage war. Every human culture had developed its own martial traditions, its own strategies, its own weapons. Where other species had united peacefully and then faced the Krix unprepared, humanity had been preparing for war since the first human picked up a rock and used it as a weapon. Over the next 72 hours, the Krix fleet continued its approach. They sent no response to Chen's warning. They simply came closer, their weapons powered, their shields active. They were confident, certain of their victory. On Earth and Mars, across Unity Station and every human outpost in the solar system, people watched the countdown. News broadcasts showed the approaching fleet, analyzed the alien ships, interviewed military experts who tried to predict what would happen. Some people prayed, others prepared, many simply waited, watching the sky for the war that was coming. Chen spent those hours coordinating with military commanders, reviewing battle plans and sending final messages to her family. She knew that she had done everything possible to avoid this conflict. She had given the Krix a fair warning, had shown them exactly what they faced, had offered them the chance to leave peacefully. They had chosen war. The 72 hours expired at exactly 14 UTC on a Tuesday afternoon. The Krix fleet crossed the boundary that humanity had designated as the edge of their defensive space. Warning klaxons sounded across Unity Station. Military crews rushed to battle stations. On Earth, billions of people watched their screens, holding their breath. Chen stood in the command center, surrounded by the military leaders of Earth. General Park gave the order they had all been dreading and preparing for in equal measure. All defensive platforms weapons-free. All fleet units engage at will. Authorization code Prometheus. The name was fitting. Humanity was bringing fire to the gods. Space lit up with weapons fire. Human railguns launched projectiles at relativistic speeds. Missile pods released swarms of nuclear-tipped warheads. Laser batteries carved through the void. The Crick's shields flared as they absorbed the initial barrage, and then their own weapons responded. The battle for Earth had begun, but the Cricks were about to learn something that Chen had tried to warn them about. Humanity didn't just know how to fight. Humanity had turned warfare into an art form, refined over thousands of years of conflict. Every mistake that could be made, humans had made and learned from. Every tactic that could work, humans had discovered and perfected. The Cricks had expected primitive resistance. They got something else entirely. As the first Crick ship exploded under concentrated human fire, as human vessels demonstrated tactics and weapons the Cricks had never encountered, the alien fleet began to realize their mistake. But it was too late. They had ignored the warning. Now they would learn why humanity had offered it. Chen watched the battle unfold, her face expressionless. She felt no joy in the violence, no satisfaction in the destruction. She felt only grim determination. Humanity had given the Cricks a choice. They had chosen poorly, and now humanity would show them exactly what happens when you ignore a warning from a species that has spent its entire existence at war. The Cricks had fought wars for 1,000 years. They had conquered 43 species, crushed countless rebellions, and never faced a foe that could match their military might. War Commander Zethus had personally overseen the subjugation of 6 worlds. He knew what victory looked like. This was not victory. Report! Zethus roared as another explosion rocked his flagship. The bridge crew scrambled at their stations, their scaled hands moving frantically across alien controls. Third cruiser is gone, Commander, his tactical officer reported. The humans are using kinetic weapons we can't predict. They're launching projectiles from multiple angles, using gravity assists from their planetary bodies to alter trajectories mid-flight. Zethus watched the tactical display in disbelief. Human ships darted between his vessels like insects, too small to focus on, too fast to track reliably. And their weapons. By the ancestors, their weapons were insane. They were using nuclear explosions as propulsion for their missiles. They were firing solid metal rods that punched through shields through sheer kinetic force. They had released clouds of what appeared to be primitive explosives that his ships were flying into at high speed. These primitives were supposed to be easy prey, Zethus muttered. They barely have faster-than-light capability. Their largest vessels are a fraction of our size. Commander, incoming missile swarm. 300 projectiles. Point defense, engage. The Crick's point defense systems lit up space with energy beams, destroying missile after missile. But there were too many. Dozens got through, slamming into shields, overwhelming them through sheer numbers. 3 more ships took damage. One lost its main drive. Pull back to defensive formation, Beta, Zethus ordered. All ships concentrate fire on their largest vessels. But even as he gave the order, Zethus felt something unfamiliar creeping into his mind. Doubt. The humans had warned them. They had shown their capabilities. And the Cricks had dismissed it as primitive posturing. They had been wrong. On Unity Station, Chen watched the battle with mixed emotions. Human forces were performing better than expected, but they were still outnumbered. The Crick's fleet was taking damage, but they were adapting quickly. And more concerning, long-range sensors showed them preparing to launch landing craft toward Earth. They're going for ground invasion, General Park observed. 3 landing zones: the Amazon basin, Siberia, and the Australian outback. Remote areas where they think resistance will be minimal. Chen allowed herself a cold smile. They still don't understand us. The Crick's dropships descended through Earth's atmosphere like falling meteors. Zethus had decided that orbital superiority was taking too long. A ground invasion would force the humans to surrender or watch their world burn. It was a tactic that had worked on 30 other worlds. The first dropships landed in the Amazon, their atmospheric shields glowing red-hot from re-entry. Ramps dropped and Crick's warriors poured out, their weapons ready. They were soldiers of the Dominion, each one trained from birth for combat. Each one enhanced with biological augmentations that made them stronger and faster than most species in the galaxy. They expected to face terrified civilians, perhaps some local militia with primitive firearms. They got the Brazilian Army's 1st Special Forces Brigade, supported by international units that had been pre-positioned for exactly this scenario. And more importantly, they got people who lived in the Amazon, who knew its every secret, who had spent generations learning how to survive and fight in the densest jungle on Earth. The 1st Crick Squad advanced cautiously through the jungle, their sensors scanning for threats. The dense canopy made visibility poor, but their thermal imaging should pick up any humans in the area. Should have. The Brazilian soldiers were wearing thermal dampening suits and had been waiting in prepared positions for 3 days. When they opened fire, it wasn't with primitive firearms. It was with railgun rifles that punched through Crick's armor like paper, with plasma cutters designed for industrial use but repurposed as weapons, with good old-fashioned high explosives. The Crick Squad was gone in seconds. More landed. More died. The jungle swallowed them, and what the soldiers didn't kill, the environment did. Humans had spent thousands of years learning to wage war in every terrain on Earth. The Amazon was one of the harshest environments on the planet, and now it belonged to humanity's defenders. In Siberia, the Cricks faced different challenges. The Russian forces waiting for them had different tactics. They let the aliens advance inland, let them spread out, let them start to believe they might secure the landing zone. Then they struck. Artillery bombardments from positions 50 kilometers away. Drone strikes from swarms of small, cheap aircraft that the Cricks' point defense couldn't target efficiently. Snipers with railgun rifles picking off commanders from 2 kilometers distant. And when the Cricks tried to retreat to their landing craft, they found the way blocked by armored units that had circled behind them. The Siberian cold killed as many as the weapons did. Crick's biology wasn't adapted for Earth's temperature extremes. They had expected climate-controlled cities, not wind-swept tundra where temperatures dropped to minus 40 degrees. Australia proved worst of all. The landing zone was in the outback, hundreds of kilometers from any city. The Cricks thought they could establish a base and advance at their leisure. What they didn't know was that Australia had spent the last 5 years turning the outback into the most heavily fortified region on Earth. Hidden beneath the red sand were bunkers, weapons caches, and an entire network of tunnels. The Australian Defence Force, combined with international units, had created a killing ground. The Cricks landed and found themselves in a carefully designed trap. They were hit from all sides by forces they couldn't locate. Artillery hidden in artificial rock formations, machine gun nests built into dried creek beds, armored vehicles that appeared from underground garages hidden beneath the sand, and soldiers, thousands of soldiers who emerged from tunnels and fought with a ferocity that shocked the Cricks. These weren't terrified primitives. These were professional warriors from a species that had been fighting wars since before the Cricks even had written language. Every human soldier knew tactics that would work against the Cricks because humanity had fought enemies using similar tactics for thousands of years. Ambush, encirclement, defense in depth. Scorched earth, guerrilla warfare. The Cricks knew how to conquer. Humans knew how to fight. By the end of the first day, all 3 landing zones were in chaos. The Cricks had landed with 10,000 troops in each location. Less than half remained combat effective. The others were dead, wounded, or captured. And the humans weren't stopping. On his flagship, Zethus received the reports with growing horror. How was this possible? These were supposed to be primitives, barely capable of spaceflight. The intelligence reports had said they were divided, constantly fighting among themselves, incapable of unified action. Recall all ground forces, Zethus ordered. We regroup in orbit and reassess. But the recall order came too late for many. Human forces had surrounded the landing zones. The Cricks who tried to reach their dropships found themselves running through minefields, being hunted by soldiers who knew the terrain intimately, being picked off by snipers and drone strikes and artillery. Some made it back to their ships. Many didn't. In the Amazon, a Cricks captain named Vakar managed to reach his dropship with what remained of his squad, 8 warriors out of 50. They scrambled up the ramp, desperate to escape this nightmare world. As the ship lifted off, Vakar looked down at the jungle below. He saw hundreds of humans emerging from hiding. They weren't running. They weren't afraid. They were standing there, weapons raised, some of them actually waving as if saying goodbye to an unwelcome guest. And on their faces he saw something that made his blood run cold. They were smiling. These humans had just fought a battle against a superior alien force, and they were smiling. Because they had won, because they had known they would win. Vekar understood then what his commander had missed. The humans hadn't been bluffing when they issued their warning. They had been showing mercy. They had been giving the Krix one chance to avoid this nightmare. And the Krix had been too arrogant to take it. In orbit, the space battle continued. The Krix fleet had managed to regroup and was now fighting more defensively. But the humans kept pressing, kept attacking, kept finding new ways to hurt them. Zethus watched his forces dwindle and realized he had made a catastrophic mistake. These humans weren't like other species. Other species had unified cultures, single governments, peaceful transitions to space-age technology. Humans were different. They were a patchwork of nations that had spent thousands of years fighting each other. Every culture on Earth had its own military tradition, its own warrior ethos, its own methods of warfare. The Chinese had Sun Tzu. The Europeans had Clausewitz. The Mongols had created the largest land empire in history through military innovation. The Romans had conquered the known world. The Americans had turned warfare into an industrial science. Every human culture had contributed something to the collective knowledge of how to fight, how to kill, how to win. And now all of that knowledge, refined over 10,000 years of constant warfare, was focused on the Krix. "Commander, the humans are broadcasting on our frequency," his communications officer reported. "Put it through." Chen's face appeared on the screen. She looked tired but determined. Behind her, Zethus could see the command center of Unity Station, and the humans there didn't look defeated. They looked angry. "War Commander Zethus, we gave you 72 hours to leave. You chose to stay. You chose to invade our world. Now you understand the cost of that choice. You have won this battle," Zethus admitted, "but the Dominion is vast. We will return with more ships, more troops." Chen shook her head. "No, you don't understand. The warning period has expired. You invaded our world. You killed our people. Now humanity isn't interested in making you leave. Now we want something else. What do you want?" Zethus asked, though part of him feared the answer. Chen's eyes were cold, harder than any material in the universe. Retribution. The word hung in space between them. Zethus felt something he hadn't felt in decades of military service. Fear. "We're not going to just drive you away," Chen continued. "We're going to follow you home. We're going to dismantle your empire piece by piece. We're going to free every species you've enslaved. We're going to hunt down every war criminal who has committed atrocities in the name of the Dominion. And we're going to make sure that the Krix Dominion never threatens another species again." "You can't," Zethus breathed. "You're one species. We are an empire of billions." "We're one species that has spent its entire existence at war," Chen replied. "We know things about warfare that you can't imagine. We have weapons we haven't shown you yet. We have tactics you've never encountered. We have a level of determination that you cannot comprehend because you've never faced an enemy that refused to surrender." She leaned forward. "You should have taken the warning, Commander. You should have left when you had the chance. Because now you've given us a reason to stop holding back. Now you're going to learn what humanity is really capable of." The transmission ended. Zethus stared at the blank screen, his mind reeling. Around him, his crew waited for orders. But what orders could he give? Retreat? Regroup? Call for reinforcements? It didn't matter. He could see it now, could understand what was about to happen. The Krix had awakened something terrible. They had attacked a species that knew nothing but war, that had spent millennia perfecting the art of violence, and now that species was coming for them. The humans had given them a warning. The Krix had ignored it. Now they would pay the price. 3 days after the failed invasion of Earth, humanity unveiled its true arsenal. The weapons they had shown the Krix before had been their defensive capabilities, the tools they would use to protect their home. What came next was something entirely different. Project Damocles launched first. From hidden silos on the dark side of Earth's moon, missiles erupted into space. These weren't the nuclear weapons the Krix had faced before. These were antimatter warheads, each one containing enough destructive power to vaporize a city. Humanity had spent 5 years developing them in secret, had built production facilities deep underground on Luna where no sensors could detect them. The missiles tracked the retreating Krix fleet with inhuman precision. Point defense systems managed to destroy some, but not enough. When the first antimatter warhead detonated against a Krix cruiser's shields, the explosion was so bright, It could be seen from Earth with the naked eye. The ship simply ceased to exist along with everything within a 5-kilometer radius. War Commander Zethus watched 3 more ships disappear in blinding flashes of light. His fleet was dying, being picked apart by weapons that shouldn't exist. These humans had barely mastered fusion power, and yet they had somehow weaponized antimatter. Emergency jump to hyperspace, Zethus commanded. All ships immediate retreat to Rally Point Gamma. The surviving Krix vessels engaged their faster-than-light drives and vanished from Earth's solar system. But they didn't vanish from human sensors. Humanity had been studying Krix technology from the first signals they intercepted 5 years ago. They knew how the Krix hyperspace drives worked, knew the signatures they left in normal space, knew how to track them. The hunt had begun. General Sarah Park stood in the command center of Prometheus Station, humanity's newest military installation hidden in the asteroid belt. Around her, displays showed the Krix fleet's trajectory through hyperspace. It was an impressive technological achievement, being able to track ships moving faster than light. But humans were good at impressive achievements when they were motivated by survival. Deploy Project Reaper, Park ordered. Across human space, massive shipyards opened their doors. Out came vessels unlike anything the Krix had seen in their 1,000 years of conquest. These ships had no crews, no life support systems, no quarters for soldiers. They were pure weapons guided by artificial intelligence systems that humanity had been developing since the early 21st century. The Reaper drones were beautiful in their deadliness. Sleek black hulls covered in sensor arrays, weapons systems that could reconfigure based on enemy defenses, and most importantly, minds that could learn, adapt, and coordinate with each other without the limitations of biological reaction times. 50 Reaper drones launched in pursuit of the Krix fleet. They accelerated to speeds no crewed vessel could match, their AI pilots unconcerned with G-forces that would turn biological beings into paste. Within hours, they had caught up to the Krix at Rally Point Gamma. The Krix had expected time to regroup, to repair damaged ships, to call for reinforcements from the Dominion. What they got was a swarm of autonomous warships that fought with perfect coordination and absolutely no fear. The Reaper drones struck like a pack of wolves. They divided the Krix fleet, isolated individual ships, and destroyed them with surgical precision. When the Krix adapted their tactics, the Reapers learned and counter-adapted within minutes. When the Krix tried to flee, the Reapers pursued. When the Krix tried to surrender, the Reapers ignored them. These machines weren't programmed for mercy. They were programmed for retribution. Zethus managed to escape Rally Point Gamma with only 3 ships remaining from his original fleet of 12. He transmitted a desperate message back to Krix Dominion space, warning them of what was coming. But he knew it was too late. The humans were coming, and they wouldn't stop until the Dominion fell. On Earth, Ambassador Chen Wei addressed the Galactic Council for the first time. The Council was a loose organization of species that maintained peaceful relations across known space. They had never interfered with the Krix Dominion, too afraid of military reprisals, but they had been watching the conflict between the Krix and humanity with great interest. Members of the Galactic Council, Chen began, her image being broadcast across thousands of light years. Humanity comes before you not as supplicants but as equals. The Krix Dominion attacked our world without provocation. They ignored our warning and invaded our home. Now we are exercising our right to defend ourselves and prevent future aggression. A council member, a species called the Trellix who resembled nothing so much as a floating jellyfish, responded in translated tones. Ambassador Chen, we understand your need for defense. But pursuing the Krix into their own territory seems excessive. Perhaps a negotiated settlement. Chen's expression hardened. The time for negotiation ended when Krix soldiers landed on Earth, when they killed our people. We gave them every chance to avoid conflict. They chose war. Now they will face the consequences. Another council member, a species called the Valorans who were tall and crystalline, spoke up. You must understand, humanity, that the Krix Dominion is vast. They control hundreds of systems. They have subjugated dozens of species. You are one world. You cannot hope to defeat an entire empire. Watch us, Chen replied simply. And the galaxy did watch. What followed over the next 3 weeks changed the balance of power in known space forever. Project Pandora deployed next. From hidden facilities on Mars, humanity released swarms of nanomachines into space. These weren't the fantasy nanobots from ancient science fiction. They were sophisticated machines, each one barely larger than a virus, designed with one purpose: to dismantle enemy ships at the molecular level. The nanomachine swarms looked like clouds of glittering dust in space. They could be deployed by missiles, scattered by drones, or simply released in the path of enemy ships. When they made contact with a Krix vessel, they went to work. Hull plating began to corrode. Systems started to fail. Within hours, a ship would be nothing but a cloud of component atoms. The Krix tried everything to stop them. They used electromagnetic pulses, heat, radiation, vacuum exposure. Nothing worked. The nanomachines were designed to survive in space, to operate in the harshest conditions imaginable. Because humans had tested them in those conditions for 5 years, had refined them, had made them perfect for their terrible purpose. But the nanomachines were indiscriminate. They destroyed Krix ships, but they could just as easily harm anyone else. So humanity did something that surprised the galaxy. They publicly released the countermeasure, a specific electromagnetic frequency that deactivated the nanomachines. They broadcast it to every species in known space. "We're not monsters," Chen explained to the Galactic Council. "We don't want to unleash something we can't control. The nanomachines are weapons of war, and we've made sure they can be stopped. We're sharing that knowledge with everyone because we want the galaxy to understand. We're not interested in conquest. We're interested in justice." The Krix military command tried to rally their forces. They called in ships from across the Dominion, assembled fleets that dwarfed anything they had sent to Earth. Surely, they thought, superior numbers would win the day. Surely these humans couldn't stand against the full might of an empire. They were wrong. Human forces didn't fight like the Krix expected. They didn't mass their ships for large fleet battles. They struck at supply lines, at shipyards, at fuel depots. They appeared out of nowhere, destroyed critical infrastructure, and vanished before reinforcements could arrive. It was guerrilla warfare on an interstellar scale, and the humans brought allies. The species that the Krix had conquered and enslaved saw their opportunity. Rebellions erupted across Dominion space. The Velcris, who had been enslaved for 200 years, rose up and sabotaged Krix facilities on their homeworld. The Dramian, conquered just 50 years prior, launched their own attacks against Krix occupation forces. Humanity provided weapons, training, and support to these rebels. They turned the Krix's own empire against them. Every world the Dominion had conquered became a battlefield. Every enslaved species became an enemy. The Krix tried to respond, but they were stretched too thin. They had built their empire on fear, and fear was no longer enough. The enslaved species knew now that the Krix could be beaten. Humanity had shown them that. Lieutenant Marcus Rodriguez piloted his fighter through the wreckage of what had once been a Krix shipyard. Around him, his squadron flew in perfect formation, their enhanced suits allowing them to survive in hard vacuum without need for spacecraft. They were the vanguard of humanity's assault forces, soldiers who had volunteered for cybernetic enhancement to better fight in space. "Target the reactor complex," Rodriguez ordered. "Plant the charges and get clear." His squad moved through the damaged station like ghosts. The Krix defenders tried to stop them, but human soldiers in hard vacuum were a nightmare to fight. They could survive in conditions that would kill most species. They moved with a grace that came from thousands of hours of training. And they fought with a determination that bordered on suicidal. The reactor complex exploded 12 minutes later. The shipyard, which had been producing Krix warships for 300 years, was destroyed. Rodriguez and his squad were already gone, racing toward their extraction point while Reaper drones covered their escape. As they flew through space, Rodriguez thought about the journey that had brought him here. 5 years ago, he had been a pilot in the Earth Defense Force, flying atmospheric fighters and wondering if humanity would ever reach the stars. Now he was a cyborg warrior, fighting battles in the void between worlds, helping to dismantle an interstellar empire. It was glorious. It was terrible. It was necessary. On the Krix homeworld, the ruling council met in emergency session. Reports flooded in from across the Dominion. Ships destroyed, stations captured, rebellions spreading, and always the humans pressed forward. "We must negotiate," argued one council member, an elderly Krix named Hessian. "Pride has cost us too much already. The humans were willing to let us leave in peace. Perhaps they will still accept terms." "Never," roared another War Master Krell. "The Dominion does not surrender. We gather every ship, every soldier. We make our stand here at the homeworld. Let the humans come. We will show them the true power of the Crix. But even as Krell spoke, he knew it was bravado. The reports were clear. The humans weren't just fighting with superior technology. They were fighting with something the Crix had never developed, the experience of 10,000 years of warfare. Every tactic humanity used had been tested and refined through countless conflicts. Every strategy had been proven in blood. The Crix had conquered through superior technology and ruthless efficiency, but they had never truly been tested. They had never faced an enemy that could match their technology and exceed their tactical knowledge. They had never fought a species that saw warfare as an art form, a science, a necessary skill that every culture had developed independently, until now. In Earth's command center, General Park watched the tactical displays with grim satisfaction. Human forces were winning across the board. Crix resistance was crumbling. The dominion that had stood for 1,000 years was falling apart in a matter of weeks. "We're receiving a transmission from the Crix homeworld," reported the communications officer. "It's War Commander Zethus. He's requesting terms of surrender." Chen was called back to the command center. She looked at the alien face on the screen, seeing the fear and resignation there. This was the moment she had known would come, the moment when the Crix finally understood what they had unleashed. "War Commander Zethus," Chen said formally. "You wish to discuss terms?" "Yes," Zethus replied, his voice hollow. "What are your demands, Ambassador Chen? What will it take for humanity to stop this war?" Chen looked at him for a long moment. She thought about the warning she had given, about the chance for peace that the Crix had rejected. She thought about the human lives lost defending Earth, about the enslaved species suffering across the Dominion. "Our demands are simple, Commander. Complete and unconditional surrender. The dissolution of the Crix Dominion. Freedom for all enslaved species. And trials for all those who have committed war crimes in the name of your empire." Zethus closed his eyes. "And if we refuse? If we fight to the last?" "Then you'll die to the last," Chen replied without hesitation. "We gave you a warning, Commander. We gave you every chance to avoid this. You chose war. Now you live with the consequences. Or die with them," Zethus whispered. "Or die with them," Chen agreed. The transmission ended. Around her, the command center was silent. They all knew what came next. The final battle. The assault on the Crix homeworld. The end of an empire that had terrorized the galaxy for 1,000 years. Humanity had given them one warning. The Crix had ignored it. Now there was only retribution. The human fleet assembled at the edge of Crix space was the largest armada humanity had ever created. 200 warships ranging from small frigates to massive battle carriers. 300 Reaper drones. Their AI minds coordinated for maximum efficiency. And aboard those ships, 50,000 human soldiers, each one trained and equipped for the coming assault. But numbers weren't what made this fleet terrifying. What made it terrifying was that every single human aboard understood exactly what they were doing. They were ending an empire. They were freeing enslaved worlds. They were administering justice to an enemy that had shown no mercy to others. Admiral James Okafor stood on the bridge of the UES Retribution, humanity's flagship. The name had been chosen deliberately. This wasn't a defensive action anymore. This was punishment for crimes committed. "All ships report ready, Admiral," reported his executive officer, Commander Liu. "Good," Okafor replied. He opened a fleet-wide channel. "All personnel, this is Admiral Okafor. In a few minutes, we will enter Crix space and proceed to their homeworld. Our mission is clear. Secure the surrender of the Crix Dominion and begin the process of liberation for all their subject species." He paused, letting his words sink in across the fleet. "But I want everyone to remember something. We're not here for revenge. We're not here to become what we're fighting against. We're here because the Crix refused to leave in peace, because they invaded our world, because they've enslaved dozens of species and killed billions over their 1,000-year empire." Another pause. "We gave them a warning. They ignored it. Now we deliver justice. But justice is not the same as cruelty. We will fight with everything we have, but we will not become monsters. We will show the galaxy that humanity can be both fierce and fair, that we can wage war without losing our humanity." Across the fleet, 50,000 voices acknowledged the order. Then as one, the human armada jumped to hyperspace. The journey to the Crix homeworld took 6 hours. During that time, the fleet maintained absolute discipline. Soldiers checked their equipment. Pilots ran simulations. Engineers ensured every system was operating at peak efficiency. And throughout it all, there was a sense of purpose that united everyone aboard. They were making history. They were showing the galaxy what humanity could do. When they emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Krix home system, they found it heavily defended. The Krix had recalled every available ship, stripped their colonies of protection, abandoned their conquered worlds. Everything they had left was here, defending their homeworld. 300 Krix warships faced the human fleet. Orbital defense platforms bristled with weapons. The planet itself was surrounded by defensive satellites and minefields. It was the most fortified system in the Dominion, and the Krix were ready to fight to the last. Admiral Okafor studied the tactical display. Analysis? Commander Liu pulled up detailed scans. They've concentrated everything here. If we defeat this fleet, the Dominion is finished. But it's going to be costly. Even with our technological advantages, they still outnumber us. Then we don't fight them head-on, Okafor decided. He opened a channel to the entire fleet. All ships implement Plan Salamander. Across the human fleet, captains smiled grimly. Plan Salamander was named after an Earth creature that could regenerate its limbs. It was a strategy of division and regeneration, of breaking the enemy into smaller pieces and destroying them individually. The human fleet split into 20 smaller groups, each one designed to operate independently. The Reaper drones formed their own squadron, their AI minds coordinating perfectly. And then they attacked, not as one massive force, but as 20 separate threats that the Krix had to respond to simultaneously. The Krix fleet tried to maintain formation, but human tactics made it impossible. Fast attack ships would dart in, launch their weapons, and retreat before the Krix could respond. Reaper drones would appear behind Krix lines, destroy a target, and vanish. Missile swarms would force the Krix to activate their point defenses, wasting power that they would need for shields. It was death by 1,000 cuts. And the Krix, who had built their military doctrine around massive fleet engagements and overwhelming force, had no effective counter. On the planet below, War Master Krell watched the battle unfold with growing horror. His ships were being picked apart. The humans were everywhere and nowhere, striking and retreating, coordinating their attacks with a precision that seemed impossible. "Send reinforcements to Sector 7, he ordered. The humans are concentrating their attack there. But by the time reinforcements arrived, the human ships had moved to Sector 3. And when forces moved to counter that threat, the humans struck at Sector 12. It was like trying to fight smoke. Aboard the Retribution, Admiral Okafor watched the battle with satisfaction. The Krix were powerful, but they were predictable. They responded to every threat, spread their forces thin, trying to cover everything, and in doing so, left themselves vulnerable everywhere. "Deploy assault shuttles," Okafor ordered. "Target the orbital platforms." Human assault shuttles, each one packed with cyborg marines, launched toward the Krix orbital defenses. These platforms were heavily armored and armed, designed to destroy any ship that came too close. But they weren't designed to fight boarding parties. Lieutenant Rodriguez led his squad through space once again, their enhanced bodies allowing them to survive the journey from shuttle to platform. They landed on the hull of a massive defense station, planted breaching charges, and cut their way inside. The Krix defenders were ready, but they were fighting in an environment where humans excelled. Close-quarters combat in artificial gravity. Human marines moved through the corridors like lethal dancers. Their weapons and reflexes enhanced by cybernetics, their tactics refined through centuries of urban warfare. Within an hour, Rodriguez's squad had captured the platform's control center. Within 2 hours, they had the entire station secured, and across the orbital defense network, similar stories played out as human boarding parties took one platform after another. War Master Krell watched his defenses crumble. The humans weren't just defeating them, they were doing it with surgical precision. Every attack was calculated, every loss minimized, every victory maximized. It was the kind of military efficiency that came from a species that had spent thousands of years perfecting the art of war. "Contact Ambassador Chen," Krell ordered. "Tell her I wish to discuss surrender terms." But even as he gave the order, Krell knew it was too late for discussion. The humans had stated their terms clearly: unconditional surrender. The only question now was whether the Krix would accept those terms or die fighting. The communication came through to the Retribution. Chen, who had joined the fleet for the final battle, appeared on the screen facing War Master Krell. "War Master," she said formally. I understand you wish to surrender. Krell looked at her with something like respect. This human had warned them. She had given them every chance to avoid this fate, and when they refused, she had shown them exactly what humanity was capable of. What are your terms? Krell asked. The same terms we stated before. Complete and unconditional surrender. All Krik's military forces will stand down immediately. The Dominion will be dissolved, all enslaved species will be freed. All war criminals will face trial, and the Krik's homeworld will be placed under temporary supervision until we can be certain that you will never again threaten another species. Krell felt the weight of 1,000 years of empire settling on his shoulders. The Dominion had seemed eternal, unshakable, but it had fallen to a species they had dismissed as primitive. And if we accept these terms, what happens to our people? Krell asked. Chen's expression softened slightly. The Krik species will survive. You'll be given the chance to rebuild, to find your place in the galaxy as equals rather than conquerors. We're not interested in genocide or enslavement. We're interested in peace and justice. You could destroy us utterly, Krell observed. You have the power now. Why offer mercy? Because mercy is what separates us from you, Chen replied. You conquered through fear and force. You never gave your enemies a choice. We gave you a warning. We gave you a chance. Even now we're offering you survival. That's the difference between humanity and the Krik's Dominion. Krell was silent for a long moment. Around him, his command center waited for his decision. The battle was still raging outside, Krik ships still dying under human attacks. Every second he delayed cost more lives. I accept your terms, Krell said finally. The Krik's Dominion surrenders unconditionally. Chen nodded. Transmit your surrender order to all Krik's forces. We'll begin organizing the transition immediately. The transmission ended. Krell turned to his officers. Send the order. All Krik's forces are to stand down immediately. The war is over. Across the Krik's fleet, weapons powered down. Shields dropped. Ships that had been fighting moments before drifted silently in space. On the surface of the Krik's homeworld, defensive installations ceased fire. The 1,000-year-old Dominion had fallen in a matter of weeks. Admiral Okafor watched the Krik surrender with mixed emotions. Relief that the battle was over. Satisfaction that justice had been served. But also a strange sadness. This victory had come at a cost both to humanity and to the Kriks. War always had costs. All ships cease fire, Okafor ordered. Begin recovery operations for any survivors, Kriks or human. Medical teams to stand by for casualties. Throughout the human fleet, the order was received with quiet acknowledgement. They had won. The Krik's Dominion was defeated. But there was no celebration, no cheering, just the quiet satisfaction of a job done, of justice delivered. On Earth, billions watched as the news spread. The Krik's Dominion, which had threatened to enslave or destroy humanity, had surrendered. The species that had conquered 43 worlds over 1,000 years had been defeated by humans in less than 2 months. Ambassador Chen addressed Earth and the Galactic Council from the bridge of the Retribution. The Krik's Dominion has surrendered unconditionally. The war is over. Now begins the harder work of building peace. She looked directly into the camera, knowing her words would be heard across the galaxy. To the species of the Galactic Council, humanity extends its hand in friendship. We don't seek to build an empire or replace the Kriks as galactic tyrants. We seek only security for our world and justice for those who have suffered under oppression. To the species formerly enslaved by the Kriks, we offer our support in rebuilding your civilizations. We will provide aid, technology, and protection as you reclaim your independence. You are no longer subjects. You are free. And to the Kriks people, we offer this, a chance to start again. A chance to find a better path than conquest and domination. We will not destroy you, but neither will we allow you to threaten others. You will rebuild under supervision, and in time you may earn your place as equals in the galactic community. Chen paused, letting her words resonate. Humanity gave the Krik's Dominion one warning. They ignored it, but even in victory we remember that warning. We remember that we wanted peace. We remember that we tried to avoid this war, and we will remember that lesson as we move forward. The galaxy has seen what humanity can do when threatened. Now let the galaxy see what humanity can do when building peace. The transmission ended. Throughout the galaxy, species watched and wondered what this new era would bring. The Krik's Dominion was gone, but in its place stood humanity, a species that had proven itself in war and now promised to prove itself in peace. The question was, would they succeed? On the Crick's homeworld, Krell stood at his window watching human ships take up orbital positions. He thought about the warning they had received, the chances they had been given, the arrogance that had led the Dominion to ignore both. The humans had been right. They had tried to tell the Cricks what would happen. They had shown their capabilities, offered peace, and only fought when forced to. And in fighting, they had shown the galaxy that humanity was unlike any species they had encountered. Krell didn't know if the Cricks would ever recover from this defeat. But he knew one thing with absolute certainty. The galaxy would never forget the lesson humanity had taught. Never ignore a warning from a species that has spent 10,000 years learning how to wage war. Because when humanity stops holding back, when they unleash everything they have learned about violence and warfare and destruction, they are unstoppable. The Cricks had learned that lesson, and they would carry it with them for the rest of their existence. 6 months after the fall of the Cricks' dominion, the galaxy looked very different. The enslaved worlds were free. The conquered species were rebuilding, and humanity stood at the center of it all, not as conquerors, but as something the galaxy had never quite seen before. Liberators who actually kept their promises. Ambassador Chen Wei walked through the halls of Unity Station, which had been expanded significantly since the war. Now it served not just as Earth's military command center, but as a diplomatic hub for dozens of species. The corridors buzzed with activity as humans worked alongside aliens to build a new galactic order. She entered the main conference room where representatives from across known space had gathered. This was the first full session of the newly reorganized Galactic Council, and the chamber was packed with species both familiar and strange. The Trellix floated near the ceiling, their translucent bodies shimmering. The Valorans stood like living crystals, refracting light in complex patterns. And there were others, species that had been hidden during Crick's rule, now free to participate in galactic affairs. In a special section, underguard but treated with dignity, sat representatives of the Cricks people. Not the military commanders who had led the Dominion's wars, but civilians who had been selected to speak for their species' future. Chen took her position at the podium. Members of the Council, honored guests, we gathered today to establish a new framework for galactic relations. The Cricks' dominion ruled through fear and force for 1,000 years. That era is over. Now we must decide what comes next. A Velcris representative, one of the first species humanity had helped free, spoke up. Their voice was translated into a melodious tone. Ambassador Chen, your species has performed miracles. You defeated the Cricks when no one else could. You freed us when we had lost hope. But now we must ask, what does humanity want from us? It was the question everyone had been wondering. Humanity had demonstrated overwhelming military power. They could easily establish their own empire, replace the Cricks as the dominant force in the galaxy. Many species feared that was exactly what would happen. Chen smiled. What does humanity want? We want what we've always wanted. Security for our world, freedom for all species to determine their own destiny, and a galaxy where disputes are settled through dialogue rather than warfare. Pretty words, said a Dramian representative, their scales rustling with skepticism. But your species has shown itself to be incredibly dangerous. You possess weapons that can destroy entire fleets. You have artificial intelligences that can wage war without biological limitations. You have soldiers enhanced beyond natural capabilities. How can we trust that you won't use these powers to dominate us as the Cricks did? Chen had expected this question. She had prepared for it. You're right to be concerned. Humanity is dangerous. We've spent 10,000 years perfecting the art of war. We have capabilities that could threaten any species in this chamber. She paused, letting that sink in. But here's what makes us different from the Cricks. We gave them a warning. We showed them exactly what we could do. We offered them peace. And only when they rejected that peace and attacked our world did we unleash our military might. Chen pulled up a holographic display showing the timeline of the conflict. Every step of the way we chose restraint when we could have chosen destruction. We could have glassed the Cricks' homeworld from orbit. We didn't. We could have exterminated their species. We didn't. We could have enslaved them as they enslaved others. We didn't. Instead, we offered them the same thing we offer every species here today. A chance to be part of something better. A chance to live in peace. A chance to prosper through cooperation rather than conquest. A Trellix floated forward, its translucent form shimmering with what their species expressed as thoughtfulness. And what of your military forces, Ambassador? You have demonstrated capabilities that make every species here nervous. Will you disarm? No, Chen said bluntly. Several representatives recoiled at her honesty. Humanity will not disarm. We will maintain our military capabilities because we've learned a hard lesson. Peace requires the strength to defend it. She gestured to the Crick's representatives. We gave the Dominion a warning. We showed them we could defend ourselves. They attacked anyway because they didn't believe we would follow through. If we had been weaker, they would have enslaved us. If we had been weaker, we couldn't have freed you. So no, we will not disarm. But we will be transparent. We will share our defensive technologies with allied species. We will establish protocols for when and how military force can be used, and we will submit to oversight from this council on our actions. Chen pulled up another display, this one showing a document. This is the Terran Accord, humanity's proposal for a new galactic order. Its principles are simple. All species have the right to self-determination. Disputes will be resolved peacefully when possible. Military force may only be used in self-defense or to prevent atrocities. And any species that violates these principles will face collective action from the entire council. Most importantly, Chen continued, the accord includes a warning system. Before any military action can be taken, the aggressor must be given a clear warning and a chance to back down. If they refuse, then and only then may force be used. She looked around the chamber. We learned this principle the hard way. We tried to give the Cricks a warning. They ignored it. But that warning gave us the moral authority to respond. It showed the galaxy that we chose peace first and war only when necessary. The Galactic Council erupted in discussion. Species debated the terms of the accord, questioned the specifics, worried about the implications. But underneath it all, Chen could sense something she hadn't expected. Hope. These species had lived under the threat of the Cricks for generations. They had watched world after world fall to the Dominion. They had felt powerless to resist, and now suddenly they were free. Now they had a choice. Now they had hope that something better was possible. Over the next 3 days, the Council debated and refined the Terran Accord. Humanity made concessions, accepting oversight mechanisms and checks on their power. Other species contributed ideas, adding protections and safeguards. And slowly a consensus emerged. On the 4th day, the vote was held. Every species in the chamber voted to adopt the Terran Accord. Even the Cricks representatives, understanding that this was their species' best chance at redemption, voted in favor. Chen felt a weight lift from her shoulders. The war was truly over. The Cricks' dominion was gone, replaced by a new order based on cooperation rather than domination. It wasn't perfect. There would be challenges ahead, disputes to resolve, problems to solve. But it was a start. After the session ended, Chen found herself approached by a Crick civilian named Tessera. She was younger than the military commanders humanity had fought, her scales bright with patterns that indicated she had been born after the Dominion's last major conquest. Ambassador Chen, Tessera said in careful English, having learned the language specifically for this conversation, I wanted to thank you. Chen was surprised. Thank me? For defeating your people's empire? For showing us a better way, Tessera replied. I grew up believing the Dominion was eternal, that conquest was our destiny, that other species existed only to serve us. But you showed us something different. You showed us that strength doesn't have to mean domination. That power can be used to protect rather than oppress. Tessera looked down at her hands. The Dominion killed billions over 1,000 years. My people have so much blood on our hands. We can never make up for that. But maybe under the accord we can at least try to be better, to learn from humanity's example. Chen placed a hand on Tessera's shoulder. That's all we can ask. The past can't be changed, but the future can be different. The Crick species isn't evil, Tessera. Your leaders made terrible choices, but your people can make better ones. You gave us a warning, Tessera said. We should have listened. Yes, you should have, Chen agreed. But even after you didn't, even after you attacked us, we still gave you a second chance. We could have destroyed you utterly. We chose mercy instead. Remember that. Remember that true strength is knowing when not to use your power. Tessera nodded and left, and Chen watched her go. The young Cricks represented something important. The possibility of change, of redemption, of a better future. 3 months later, Chen stood once again before the Galactic Council, but this time in a very different capacity. The Council had voted to establish the Galactic Peace Force, a military organization designed to enforce the Terran Accord and protect all member species. And they had voted to place it under human command. General Sarah Park stood beside Chen, accepting the responsibility on behalf of humanity. The Galactic Peace Force will operate under strict rules of engagement, Park announced. We will intervene to stop aggression, to prevent atrocities, and to maintain the peace. But we will always give a warning first. Every species that considers breaking the accord will be given the same choice humanity gave the Crix. Stand down, and there will be peace. Continue and face the consequences. We pray that future aggressors will be wiser than the Dominion was. Back on Earth, Chen finally returned home to her family. She stood in her garden looking up at the night sky. The stars looked different now than they had before first contact. They were no longer unknown. They were no longer threatening. They were home to allies, to species humanity had freed and now protected. Her daughter, now 12 years old, came to stand beside her. Mom, did we do the right thing? Fighting the Crix, I mean. Chen considered the question carefully. We did the only thing we could do, sweetie. We gave them a warning. We tried to avoid war, but when they attacked us, we had to defend ourselves. And once we were fighting, we had to see it through to the end. But so many people died. Humans and Crix and others. Yes, they did. War always has costs. That's why we tried so hard to avoid it. That's why we gave the warning. Chen put her arm around her daughter. The important thing is what we do now. We've shown the galaxy what humanity can do in war. Now we have to show them what we can do in peace. Do you think it will work? The Accord, I mean? Chen looked up at the stars, thinking about all the species out there, all the worlds that were now free, all the possibilities that lay ahead. I don't know, but I know we're going to try. We're going to build something better than what the Crix had, something based on cooperation instead of domination. And if someone else attacks, if someone else refuses to listen to warnings, Chen's expression hardened slightly. Then they'll learn the same lesson the Crix learned. Humanity is willing to live in peace. We prefer peace. We'll do almost anything to maintain peace. But if someone forces us to fight, we'll show them why they should have listened to the warning. Her daughter thought about that. So we're like the adults of the galaxy now? Making sure everyone behaves? Chen laughed softly. I don't know if I'd put it that way. But yes, in a sense, we've proven ourselves. Now we have a responsibility to use our strength wisely, to protect the weak, to prevent aggression, to build a better galaxy. No pressure then, her daughter said with a smile. No pressure at all, Chen agreed, smiling back. Across the galaxy on worlds both human and alien, life continued. The Velcris rebuilt their civilization with human aid. The Dramian established new governments free from Crix control. Dozens of species that had been suppressed under the Dominion now flourished. And on the Crix homeworld, under careful supervision but with increasing autonomy, the Crix people began the long process of rebuilding their society. They studied humanity carefully, trying to understand how a species could be so fierce in war, yet so merciful in victory. They learned about human history, about the countless conflicts that had shaped humanity's character. They learned that humans had given each other warnings too throughout their history, treaties and ultimatums and diplomatic efforts to avoid war. Sometimes those warnings had been heeded, often they hadn't. But humans never stopped trying, never stopped believing that peace was worth the effort. War Commander Zethus, awaiting trial for war crimes, received a visitor. It was Chen come to speak with him one final time. Why, Zethus asked. Why did you give us that warning? You knew we wouldn't listen. You knew we would attack. So why offer us a chance at peace? Chen sat across from him in the holding cell. Because that's who we are. We've seen too much war, fought too many battles, lost too many people. We know the cost of conflict, so we always try to avoid it even when we know it's futile. But you were prepared for war, Zethus observed. All those weapons, all those plans. You knew the warning would be ignored. Hope for the best, prepare for the worst, Chen quoted. It's an old human saying. We hoped you would listen. We prepared for you not to. Both things can be true. Zethus was quiet for a moment. I wish we had listened. So do I, Chen said sincerely. So many lives could have been saved. But you didn't, and now we all have to live with the consequences. What will happen to me? Zethus asked. You'll stand trial. The evidence will be presented. If you're found guilty of war crimes, you'll be punished. But fairly, according to law. We're not interested in revenge, Commander. We're interested in justice. And my people, your people will survive. They'll rebuild. They'll find a new path forward. It won't be easy and it won't be quick, but they'll have the chance to become something better than they were under the Dominion. Chen stood to leave. You know, Commander, that warning we gave you wasn't just for you. It was for ourselves, too. It was a reminder that we choose peace when we can, that we don't want war, that we're willing to give even our enemies a chance. And now that warning stands for the entire galaxy, Zethus said. Yes, now every species knows humanity will give one warning. We'll show you exactly what we're capable of. We'll offer you peace, but if you ignore that warning, if you choose war, then you'll face everything we've learned in 10,000 years of conflict. Chen walked to the door, then paused and looked back. The galaxy is watching, Commander. They're watching to see if we can build something better than what you had. They're watching to see if power can be used for good instead of evil. They're watching to see if warnings can lead to peace instead of war. And they're learning, she continued. Every species that saw what happened to the Krix Dominion is learning. They're learning that aggression has consequences, that warnings should be heeded, that peace is the better path. Your Dominion fell, Commander, but maybe something better can rise in its place, something based on cooperation instead of conquest, on dialogue instead of domination, on warnings that lead to wisdom instead of war. Chen left and Zethus sat alone in his cell thinking about her words. The Dominion was gone. His empire had fallen, but maybe, just maybe, the galaxy would be better for it. In the years that followed, the Terran Accord became the foundation for galactic peace. Disputes arose, of course. Conflicts emerged, but each time humanity gave a warning. Each time they offered a chance for peaceful resolution. And more often than not, that warning was heeded. Because the galaxy had learned a fundamental truth. Humanity demands retribution when pushed to war. But they prefer peace. They will negotiate, mediate, and compromise to avoid conflict. They will give warnings and chances and opportunities for better choices. But if those warnings are ignored, if peace is rejected, if aggression is chosen, then humanity will unleash everything they have learned about warfare. And 10,000 years of constant conflict had taught humanity lessons that no other species could match. The Krix Dominion learned that lesson too late. But their fall served as a warning to the rest of the galaxy. Listen when humanity speaks of peace. Because the alternative is learning what humanity can do in war, and that was a lesson no species wanted to learn firsthand. The stars shone bright over Earth, and humanity looked up at them with hope. Hope for peace, hope for cooperation, hope for a future where warnings led to wisdom instead of war. Because in the end, that was what humanity wanted most of all. Not conquest, not domination, just the chance to live in peace among the stars, secure in the knowledge that they had the strength to defend that peace if necessary. Earth had given the aliens one warning. The galaxy would remember that warning for generations to come, and perhaps if they were wise, they would heed it, because humanity's retribution was terrible to behold, but their mercy was even more powerful. And knowing when to use which was what made humanity truly formidable. The age of the Krix Dominion had ended. The age of the Terran Accord had begun, and the galaxy was better for it.